This episode is brought to you by our good friends at NFL Sunday Ticket on YouTube TV. I'm sure by now you've all gotten back into your Sunday routines, but they could be even better. With NFL Sunday Ticket and YouTube TV, you get the most live NFL games all in one place, every game, every Sunday. And you can even watch up to 4 different games at once with multi-view, one of my favorite inventions of this decade. It's exactly what you need to catch all the action. Make your Sundays more magical. And also, YouTube TV is great. I got it this year. It's awesome. Sign up now at youtube.com/BS. Device and content restrictions apply. Local and national games on YouTube TV. NFL Sunday Ticket for out-of-market games excludes digital-only games.
The Two-Footed Podcast is brought to you by EPLindex.com and our presenting sponsor, Liberty Shield. Liberty Shield is a VPN provider. A virtual privacy network allows you to go online, change your location, access things you're geo-blocked from, while keeping your data safe. So, as an example, if you are a UK expat and want access to BBC iPlayer to watch Match of the Day, or ITV Hub, or all 4, when you get that message that says this content is not available in your location, a Liberty Shield VPN gets you around that block, allows you to watch whatever you want on those services while also keeping your data safe. And it goes further than that. It allows you to open up Netflix's entire library by just changing your IP address. Liberty Shield is the #1 rated VPN provider on Trustpilot with 5-star ratings across the board. So go to libertyshield.com right now, use the code EPL25 and get either the hardware package or the software package. The hardware package is a router that you plug into your existing router, and any item you want to change the IP address on, be it your phone or your television, you connect that to the new Liberty Shield router. All other items can remain connected to your existing router. There's also a software package, which is instantly downloadable to your device, and you can get using straight away. Again, libertyshield.com, EPL25 for 25% off at checkout. We're also brought to you by Home of Hopcroft, a giftware and homeware company located in Scotland but shipping worldwide. Check out homeofhopcroft.co.uk and do check out the EPL Index and Anfield Index shops, which you'll find on Etsy. Use the codes EPL10 or RED10 for 10% off at checkout. And lastly, do remember to check out A Tad Predictable, hosted by Tadiwa. That podcast is on this feed before every Premier League match week. And then the EPL Roundtable, hosted by Kevin DeVries, on its own EPL Roundtable feed. So just search EPL Roundtable in your podcast device. And that's out after every match week. Now, on with the show.
What's good, boys and girls? Two-Footed Podcast. Today is Thursday. It is the 15th of August. Hope you're all well. Miserable morning, but the sun has now come out, so it's looking very nice as I look across the hills, which is nice. Right, we had some football last night. We had 3 games in the EFL Cup, and we had the European Super Cup. So we're going to do that. We're going to do some listeners' questions. We're going to have a little chat about defensive midfielders, and then we're going to do the gossip and wrap ourselves up. So, last night, EFL Cup, Leeds United 0, Middlesbrough 3, Anthony Dyke-Steele, Delano Bergzorg, and Josh Coburn with the goals. Comprehensive. Borough go to Elland Road and slap Leeds around in what is a Yorkshire derby, but I'm never, ever going to consider Middlesbrough part of Yorkshire, no matter how much English people get upset by that. It's just, no. Hull City 1, Sheffield Wednesday 2. Charlie McNeil scores on 1 minute. Marvin Malin equalises on 9 minutes. McNeil scores again on 10 minutes. It looks like we're on for like a 6-5 or a something bananas, and then there's no more goals. And Sheffield Wednesday are through. And then in the final game, Plymouth 3, Cheltenham 0, Ben Waine, Ryan Hardy, and Mustafa Bundu with the goals, giving Wayne Rooney a victory there. European Super Cup final, it was Real Madrid versus Atalanta. Obviously, Champions League winners versus Europa League winners. Pretty good game, to be fair. Atalanta caused Real some trouble, even though they were not nearly at full strength. No Coop Miners, obviously, because he's trying to force a move. No Scalvini because he's injured. A couple of other players out, but still a pretty strong squad. But Real, I mean, just ludicrous. It's just ludicrous. Thibaut Courtois on goal, right? One of the 3 or 4 best keepers on the planet. Dani Carvajal is a top 10 to 15 right back of all time. Somewhere between about 9th or 10th and 15th ever. Super underrated. Ferland Mendy is a very good defensive left back who's decent enough on the ball, but gives you a platform when Carvajal's the other one of just solid defence. Militao and Rudiger in the middle, both capable of errors, but also, you know, great athletes. And I think Militao is going to be very, very good as he continues to develop. Rudiger is capable of great performances, but just can't sustain any kind of level. Midfield, though, is ridiculous. Fede Valverde, Aurelien Tchouameni, and Jude Bellingham. That is disgusting. And that's without Camavinga. That's with Toni Kroos retired. That's with Luka Modric sat on the bench. That's ridiculous. And in attack, Rodrigo, Mbappe, and Vinicius Jr., which should just terrify the life out of absolutely everybody. Whether it's the 3 of them or 2 of them with Bellingham in behind, that is going to be frightening to play against. Pace, elite movement, intelligence, high IQ, skill set, just everything you want, they have it. And then you've still got Endrick, and you've still got Arda Güler. It's just disgusting how strong this Real Madrid squad is right now. Little bit light in defence, I think. Like, Lucas Vazquez is the backup right back. I suppose Jesus Vallejo will be one of the backup centre-backs. They will get David Alaba back, which obviously will help. And there are some young players that they're quite high on and believe can come into the fold this year. But, I mean, that midfield and attack is just stupid. Just stupidly good in terms of who started and who wasn't playing, who came off the bench, who the depth is. You've still got Dani Ceballos there. You've still got Brahim Diaz there. I'm not big fans of either, but they're decent players. You've got Lunin as the backup goalkeeper, who is really, really good. It's just a silly team. It's frightening what they could be over the next 4 or 5 years. Real win the game 2-0. Now, they probably should have been 2 up before they scored. Rodrigo in particular missed a really good chance. But Fede Valverde scores on 59. It's just brilliant work by Vinicius. Valverde goes in and has a tap in from 3 yards out with nobody near him. And then on 68, Mbappe scores his first goal in Real Madrid white. It's good work from Bellingham, but it's all about the movement of Mbappe. He relocates once, draws the defence towards himself, then explodes on the second movement. Bellingham plays it to him. Lovely weight on the pass, and Mbappe finishes really well. And you couldn't argue that Real were fully deserving of their victory. Right. Let's talk about defensive midfielders first, then go to break and come back and do questions. So, I was watching a video today of Sergio Busquets. And for the last couple of days, I've been seeing a lot of commentary on defensive midfielders, largely because Liverpool are trying to buy one, and obviously most of my timeline is Liverpool related. It's either Liverpool related or people telling fascists what ought to do with themselves, which is wonderful, wonderful. So there's a lot of discourse about what is a defensive midfielder. And some people are stuck on the idea of, well, if they play deepest in midfield, that makes them the defensive midfielder. And that's why you get people trying to claim that Andrea Pirlo was a defensive midfielder. There's a difference between defensive midfield and deep-lying playmaker. Hakan Çalhanoğlu, for example, is more a deep-lying playmaker. Now, he has developed a bit as a defensive player, but I would still call him a weak point defensively. Jorginho is the same. He moved from more advanced position back because of his passing ability. Didn't have the pace, didn't have any kind of explosive movements. So when playing higher up, struggled to get separation, struggled to get turned on the ball, and teams were able to just pickpocket him and move away. But when you put him that bit deeper and he plays in bigger amounts of space, he can pick passes. And this is like exactly why Andrea Pirlo was brought back from the number 10 position he began in at Brescia back to that deep role that everybody knows that he kind of became famous for. But when he played that role, he would always have at least one and often two ball winners in front of him. So at Milan, he would have Gattuso and often Ambrosini would be in there. At Juve, he would have Vidal and Marchisio. Two lads who are there to do the running, do the work, do the ball winning, and then he can sit deeper in that pocket and just pick passes and dictate play. Çalhanoğlu does something similar to that. Now, one of the players playing in front of him for Inter last season quite a bit was Mkhitaryan. And obviously, Nicolo Barella is not a defensive midfielder either, but he is quite a good ball winner. He's a play disruptor, maybe more to the point. They also have Asllani. They also have Frattesi. These are not ball winners, but they are aggressive. They are energetic. They covered vast amounts of ground, and they do press players and push them back. And what Inter like to do is funnel the opposition wide. The whole purpose of Frattesi, Mkhitaryan, Barella, Asllani is not necessarily to go and win the ball. It's to push the opposition wide into areas that Inter are more comfortable defending. Because Inter would prefer that you cross the ball against them as opposed to play through the middle. Because if you cross against them, you're crossing into areas with Bastoni and with De Vrij, previously with Milan Skriniar. And that's something that they're comfortable with because they'll back themselves to win those aerial battles. But if you play through them, they don't like having De Vrij having to step out. They don't like having Benji Pavard having to step out and deal with somebody because either they can get played around or they're not quite quick enough to get out and people get shots away. So the reason I bring up Busquets is because it will never leave my mind that Jamie Carragher a few years ago uttered the statement on national television to a global audience, Sergio Busquets can't defend. Now, Busquets was every bit as good on the ball as Pirlo. Every bit. He didn't play the long passes as often as Pirlo, but he was more than capable of doing so. The reason he didn't is because that's not the style of play of Barcelona, and his job was more to move the ball quickly between the lines, get it to Iniesta, get it to Xavi, get it to Alves, get it to Messi, and let them go from there. But the notion that he couldn't defend winds me up to this day. So again, his job was not to step out of midfield and win the ball back. That's never something he was going to do. Sergio Busquets played the game 90% in his mind and 10% with his legs. What he wanted to do was time when he would meet the opposing runners and the angle he would meet them at, and then lead them into channels where other Barcelona players could come back, they could get a trap and take the ball away. Which is why when you look at Busquets from a statistical point of view, he doesn't jump off the page defensively. But when you look at Barcelona and their defensive record, during his peak, they were elite. And the reason for that is, when teams would play through the initial Barcelona press, Busquets would pick his angle and he would go to meet a runner. And in doing so, he would look to block a passing lane so that he wasn't able to be played around. And he would look to never meet somebody square up so they couldn't just run past him. because then he either gets beaten or he has to commit a foul. And if he commits a foul in those situations, he's likely getting booked. So he would meet them at an angle that would be favourable to him. And he would send them towards the touchline. He would not allow them to progress through the middle of the field. By sending them towards the touchline, he's sending them into the area where the fullback lives. So whether it was Jordi Alba or before him Eric Abidal, whether it was Dani Alves, he would send them towards them. That player would then press in, and now they have that attacker hemmed in on two sides. Then you're getting Xavi or Iniesta coming back to hem them on a third side. And now they don't have an out ball. And that was the magic of the Barcelona transition defence. Never to overcommit into a tackle, always looking to get multiple players against that one ball carrier and take away their options. Force them then to make a bad decision, or force them to have to play it back and then reset. And once they got into their set defensive state, they were very hard to play through. They weren't big, they weren't physical in midfield. Busquets is, 6'2", but he's not what you call a physical player. You wouldn't mistake him for Victor Wanyama, for example. You wouldn't mistake him for Wilf Ndidi, for example. And Xavi and Iniesta are obviously both small players, but they could overcome any physical limitations with their intelligence and with how well coached they are. And that starts at La Masia. That's not something that they got from Pep in the first team. That's something that they're designed with from a young age. You look at any midfielder that's come through the Barcelona academy from a young age, when they go in at like 9, 10, 11, 12, by the time they get to the first team, they're exceptional defensively. Now, they might not jump off the page for you statistically. They might not stand out physically. They might not be big-time ball winners. But when you watch them play and watch the decisions that they make and watch how they play as part of a team defensive structure, not a one-man wrecking crew, a team defensive structure, every one of them does it seamlessly. Fermin Lopez does it seamlessly. Gavi is brilliant at it. Busquets, Iniesta, Xavi. Cesc was exceptional at it. Cesc was someone that you wouldn't necessarily think of as a good defender, but he was clever defensively and as part of a team structure was excellent. Now, when he played for other clubs that didn't have that same type of structure, that's where you would see breakdowns. But it wouldn't be because of him, it would be because of the next guy not doing what he was meant to do. Cesc would take the right action, the next guy wouldn't know what he was at. Because it would be Matteo Flamini, it would be Alex Song, it would be whoever. Thiago Alcantara is alone, incredibly good defensively. And none of these players are big-time ball winners. None of these players are, physical specimens. All of them are slight, small, but super competitive and super intelligent. And at Barcelona, it does seem to be that you can in England, you can overcome a talent discrepancy by sheer hard work. But the players that do that are often a little bit brainless. At Barcelona, they overcome any kind of discrepancy, be it talent or physical, with intelligence. So you'll see players have pretty good careers at Barcelona who might not have the same elite level talent as others, but they've got high level intelligence. Pedro, prime example. Pedro wasn't the quickest winger in the world. He wasn't a particularly skillful player. He wasn't a great dribbler, wasn't a great passer, wasn't a great crosser. He was super intelligent. So he focused on movement and decision-making and finishing. Movement, decision-making, finishing. And as a winger, he basically became a secondary striker as opposed to a facilitator. And when he came to England afterwards, we saw it with Chelsea, his movement was incredible. But back to Busquets and that defensive midfield. So Busquets is what you would call a sitting shield. He would move side to side, looking to engage runners and move them out of central areas, not looking to engage them and win the ball back. Now, you will get those shielding types who do step out and try and win the ball back. I mentioned Wanyama earlier. He's one like that as well. He would step out, he would back his physicality, and he would try and win the ball back. So you've got two types there of just that type of midfielder. I'm just going to use recent examples because I could go back into the bag and look at people like Redondo and Rijkaard and stuff like that. But let's keep this more recent years. You've got your destroyers then, those players that are those one-man wrecking crews, those seek and destroy players who gamble and go and try and win the ball. Mascherano, Kante, Ugarte, they have a definite place in the game, but they don't work very well as a lone pivot in a midfield three. They work in a double pivot with somebody else who's capable of sitting in and holding that midfield shape. So with Mascherano, for example, when he was at Liverpool, he played with Alonso. And Alonso was from the Pirlo school, that deep-lying playmaker, but obviously had those Spanish sensibilities, that Spanish intuition, good positional sense, clever decision-maker. He would sit in and hold that Liverpool midfield. When Busquets went to Barcelona, he couldn't play in midfield for them. Unless they played him and Busquets together, Mascherano was ruining their defensive structure. So it actually made more sense when he went to centre-back and they were able to just put a tether on him. You stay there. Don't do anything else. Stay there. Do not go roaming. Do not hunt the ball. If the ball comes to you, win it then, but do not go and hunt the ball. But when you have him in midfield, because of how much you're asking your midfield to play at the top level, he wasn't good enough on the ball if you were taking away his ball winning. You weren't getting an additive version of Mascherano. He was weakening your possession play. And if you weren't getting the elite level of him off the ball, it wasn't worth having him in the team. But at centre-back, where it's a lot more simple in terms of possession, you could get away with that. You could take away that elite level ball winning. He was always going to be a very good defender. He was really good at picking runners as they came through. He could cover his fullback. He could sweep his centre-back partner. And you didn't need him to be that search and destroy type of midfield player because you weren't losing anything in your build-up because Mascherano on the ball was as good as most centre-backs. Kante is the same. The best versions of Kante played next to Danny Drinkwater and Nemanja Matic, both of whom would sit in, hold that midfield and allow him to do what he did best, which was to go and hunt the ball and win it back. And when we look at someone like Ugarte, he thrived in a double pivot at Sporting. Last season, he goes to PSG who play a 4-3-3. And he struggles there. Kante struggles in that 6 role in the 4-3-3. Mascherano, like I say, at Barcelona struggled in that 6 role in a 4-3-3. Because they don't have the positional discipline. Their elite skill set is their ability to go and win the ball back. It's not that ability to hold a midfield, to keep that shape, to have structure, and to shield your defence and have the discipline to not try and win the ball back every time you engage a runner. The other thing with midfielders like those three in particular, Kante, Mascherano and Ugarte, they all have really good recovery speed, especially Mascherano and Kante. They could get beaten and get back into position. They could gamble on trying to win a ball, get played around, and then get back to the ball. Whereas someone like a Busquets is unable to do that, doesn't have the foot speed to do it. Fabinho didn't have the foot speed to do it either. Fabinho was a bit of a hybrid in that he did originally play in a double pivot. He was more along the lines of that destroyer type. But he never had that elite speed. So when he came to Liverpool, they weren't going to allow him to do that. But at Liverpool, what he did have was next to him, he had Gini Wijnaldum. Now, Fabinho could sit and shield your defence. He could greet runners and move them here, there, and everywhere and do anything he wanted with them because he had the physicality. He was strong enough. He was quick enough over a short distance to get to the ball. And then once he got close enough to you, it was very hard to create any separation from him. But you'd watch Liverpool play, and if the game was getting away from them a little bit, he'd get really aggressive and go and start winning the ball back higher up. And he was allowed to do that because he had Gini Wijnaldum, who just tuck back in behind him and hold that midfield. I don't think Fabinho would have had the same success at Liverpool if not for that. Now, one player who was more of a destroyer type, but did have success in a midfield three, was Fernandinho. But when you look at that 4-3-3 of Pep, it was a lot more of a 4-4-2 because De Bruyne would go wide and Sané would drop back. So while it was David Silva sitting in midfield, not necessarily the ideal player from a defensive structure, again, just being brought up with those Spanish sensibilities, that idea of team defense, and also having Pep coaching that idea, even though at times it would cause issues, they could get away with it. Prior to that, Fernandinho largely played a double pivot prior to Pep. Mancini played a double pivot and Pellegrini played a double pivot. So again, he could be that more destroyer one, and a Gareth Barry would sit in midfield. Or a Nigel de Jong would sit in midfield. And when it was him and de Jong, even though I don't think there was much overlap, if any, de Jong could go and win the ball high up and Fernandinho could sit in. But Gareth Barry and Fernandinho was a really strong midfield pairing. Again, for the same reason, because he would sit in, Barry would sit in and hold the midfield and let Fernandinho go and win the ball and be really aggressive. When we look at Rodri, who's unquestionably the best defensive midfielder, and frankly the best midfielder in the world right now, he again is one that's more of a shield. If you look at Rodri and look at his defensive metrics, they don't blow you away at all. Like, they're not... If you just looked at them blindly, you would not think this is the best defensive midfielder on the planet. You wouldn't even think he was in the top 50 because they're not impressive, because they're not designed to be impressive. He makes 2 tackles a game, that's in the 52nd percentile. He wins 1.3 a game, that's in the 61st percentile. He only tackles 50.7% of dribblers. He makes 0.87 blocks per game, 0.81 interceptions, 1.2 clearances. These are not elite defensive numbers because that's not the position. Trying to quantify defensive midfielders with defensive stats is the most mind-numbingly stupid thing that takes place in the world of data. Anyone in football analytics who tries to quantify defensive midfielders by the numbers needs their head examined, or needs to go outside, touch grass and watch a game of football, because they don't know what they're looking for. Defensive metrics in general are not good. But to take it back to Liverpool, my belief at the start of this summer was that the best player Liverpool could target for that number 6 position was Alan Varela. And I stand by that to this day, that Alan Varela is the best option for Liverpool to bring in a defensive midfielder that works in the system and works for Arne Slot. But again, you look at the defensive numbers and they don't jump off the page for you. And again, that's because he's more of that Busquets type than a Mascherano type. And people see an Argentine he's 5'10". People seem to think he's 5'7". He's 5'10". People look at that and think, oh, well, he must be a ball winner. Must be a ball winner, has to be a ball winner. But he's not at all. That's not what he does. He's someone that makes clever decisions, that leads runners into the right areas, that plays as part of a structured team defence. That's what he did at Porto last year. However, if you want to travel back in time and go back and look at him in the Copa Libertadores, and look at the defensive numbers from there, all of a sudden they start to look a bit more like what you'd expect, because at times, depending on who his partner was, he was tasked with being a bit more of a rover and a bit more of a ball winner. So you go back to their Copa Libertadores run in 2023, and he's at 2.89 tackles per 90, which is in the 85th percentile. He's at 1.37 blocks. He's at 1.51 interceptions. These are top-level numbers, 4.4 tackles and interceptions per 90, as opposed to last season at Porto, where he's playing in a more conservative shape, a more structured defence, and his tackles and interceptions per 90, where did I have that? Sits at 2.33, which is very low, because that's what was being asked of him. And the sooner people also start to realise that numbers like these also depend on what a manager is asking of a player. You have to look at the tactical profile of the manager before you start making assumptions about the player. Even in the Champions League last year, Varela's numbers jumped quite a bit. And again, you also have to look at, is this a possession team? So with Busquets, with Rodri, with Varela at Porto, that team is averaging 60, 65, 70% possession. But in the Champions League, Porto are averaging closer to 40%. So there's more defensive work to do. So his numbers go up. Same thing with Boca Juniors. Depending on who they're playing, possession could be high, defensive numbers would be low. Possession could be low, defensive numbers will be high. Rodri is never going to play in a team that has 30% possession. So he's never going to go out and have elite level defensive numbers. But what he will give you is elite level defensive performance. And with the defensive midfield position, performance is what you need to measure. The only way to measure that is with your eyes. You cannot measure it with data. You just cannot. Including physical data, such as high-speed sprints, distance covered, all, because again, that comes down to what they've been asked to do. You will have managers who tell their players in whatever position, this is the grid you play in. Don't want to see you anywhere else. You're a left back, right? I want a defensive left back so you don't cross the halfway line. As opposed to, say, Jurgen Klopp and Andy Robertson, who tell him, get yourself as high as possible, as frequently as possible. Don't necessarily worry about what's behind you because we've got Van Dijk. Whereas Luke Shaw, under, let's say, Jose Mourinho, was getting very different instructions because of the needs of the tactical setup. So much of this is to say that when I see lists of defensive midfielders being presented on social media, and one of the arguments I saw recently was about, can Liverpool find an alternative to Zubimendi? And someone putting together a list of, potential options. So the statement here is, list of defensive midfielders who are better or on par with Zubimendi. Now, this list hurt my eyes and my brain, so let's go back through it. Frankie de Jong, he's not a defensive midfielder. He's never been a defensive midfielder. What he is he's an outstanding box-to-box midfielder in theory. He's very good on the ball. He's got great energy. He can roam around, win the ball back. He's impressed. He can do all those nice things that you want him doing, but he's not a defensive midfielder. And when he plays deep, he's still not being a defensive midfielder. He's being a deep-lying playmaker. And when you watch teams that have Frankie in that deepest role, they do tend to struggle defensively. Joshua Kimmich, well, first and foremost, he is a right back. He's not a defensive midfielder. And the reason we know this is because every manager he's had at Bayern has said he's not a defensive midfielder, and I don't want him there. He might want to play there, but he's not good enough to play there. Not good enough in that position. Bruno Guimaraes, again, he's not a defensive midfielder. He's the guy you put in the double pivot with an Ugarte or an Ederson. That's the role for him. It's probably the best role for a Frankie. The best role for Kimmich is right back. But that's the best use of Guimaraes. Now, he can play as the defensive midfielder, and he is very good at it, but you're not getting the very best of him. Manuel Ugarte is obviously a ball winner. That's fine. We'll accept him. Anton Stach, yeah, fine. He's a good 6. Yusuf Fofana is not a defensive midfielder and never has been. Like, watch Monaco play. The last couple of years, he was playing with Tchouaméni first, who is a 6, and then he was playing with Mo Camara, who's also a 6. Andre, Fluminense, hopeless defensively. Hopeless. Too small, too slow, not smart enough, good on the ball, good passer, not great. He's not a 6. Varela is a 6. He is a natural 6 and always has been. Hjulman is a 6. Manu Kone, I would say Manu Kone needs to play in a double pivot next to, again, a Guimaraes type, an Adam Wharton type. You know, that kind of deep playmaker. And allow him to go and be dynamic and win the ball. But yeah, I'll take him as a defensive midfielder, but he's not as good as Zubimendi. And then Richard Rios. And I think Richard Rios is very, very good, and I think he could be a really good 6, but there's still question marks over him. But I just see all this discourse day after day about defensive midfielders and this guy, and he plays the... No. Stop looking at where he plays and look at how he plays. And stop pulling up data that largely you don't understand of FBref, Data MB, and wherever else, and trying to make comparisons. The best defensive midfielder we have seen in the last 20 years by a country mile is Sergio Busquets. Rodri's probably number 2, but the best by a mile is Busquets. Neither of them have good defensive metrics. Neither of them. And I would be fairly certain, if the metrics existed, that Frank Rijkaard would not have great defensive metrics, that Dieter Eltz would not have great defensive metrics, that Redondo would not have great defensive metrics. Mascherano and Kante would have outstanding defensive metrics, because that was the style of play, but they relied on a certain system and having a partner in it too. Declan Rice is very good defensive metrics. He's not a defensive midfielder. He's a box-to-box player. Can he play as a 6? Yes. Is he great there? Absolutely not. He's good there on a good day and average most of the time. And he gets away with a lot of mistakes because he does have exceptional physical attributes. But from a technical point of view, from an intelligence point of view, from an off-ball point of view, no. Declan Rice is a good on-ball defender. Mascherano, elite on-ball defender. Kante, elite on-ball defender. But as an off-ball defender, and by that I mean the person who's not chasing around after the ball, they don't stack up as well as the likes of Busquets, the likes of Rodri. So, if you want to spot a spoofer, ask them to name the best defensive midfielders in the world. And if they name Rodri or Joshua Kimmich, just laugh and walk away. I'll be back after the break with listeners' questions. Right, welcome back. So, question from Isaac Gilding. If there was a possibility of getting Carlo in to replace Klopp back when it was announced, would you have preferred that over Arne? Coming a bit late to this, but just occurred to me that Carlo coming in and putting the finishing touches on the squad along with his winning habits might have maximised the winning potential of some of our ageing greats. What do you think Carlo might have wanted in terms of recruitment and tactics? Yes, I would have taken Carlo over Arne. Nothing against Arne, but I take proven winner every time. It's also the reason I would have taken Zidane. Right, what would Carlo have done? So Carlo is very adaptable. This is the first point. There's no set Carlo Ancelotti system, formation, way of playing. Carlo Ancelotti's modus operandi is to win. That's it. So I think he would have looked at the squad and realised that the best way for this Liverpool squad to win was going to be to make them stronger defensively, to keep balance, and potentially to go back to something more similar to what they were doing from 2018 to 2020. Now, I think he would have gone Trent at right back, Konate, Virgil in the middle, and a new left back. But I think he would have gone with an attack-minded left back. I think potentially he goes with someone along the lines of an Alphonso Davies, a Theo Hernandez, that type of profile, that kind of attacking, lightning quick power runner down that flank. In midfield, he's going to want one who can control the game, so that's where McAllister comes in. I think he would want two in midfield. A 6 and a defensive-minded 8. A Tchouaméni and a Camavinga. A Gattuso and a Seedorf type of player. Seedorf wasn't so much defensively, but he was outstanding defensively. He was more of an all-rounder who could do everything, but he would give them great balance. But I think a Camavinga-Tchouaméni type of pair is what he would have wanted. A pure holding midfielder. I think he might have pushed for someone along the lines of Hjulman. You know, that kind of big, powerful figure. And then that more athletic gap filler, transition killer, which is, I think, where you'd look at someone like Danilo from Nottingham Forest. I think that's the type of midfield additions he would have wanted. And then in attack, I think he would have gone Salah, Jota, and Szoboszlai off the left. I think he would have gone Szoboszlai off the left. If we think back to the first Champions League that Real Madrid won in kind of this run of them, which was Carlo's first one pre-Zidane, I'm fairly certain it was Bale, Benzema, and Salah. Sorry, Bale, Benzema, and Cristiano. He has his goal machine, his Cristiano in Salah. The power runner would be Szoboszlai. Now, he doesn't have that conduit 9 like a Benzema at Liverpool. I do think he would have wanted that, but I don't think it would have been a year one thing. I think over 2 years he would be looking to bring in 4 starters. Would be my guess. And I do think you'd be looking at, I don't know if Theo would be available, but that type. It could be someone like even DeMarco at Inter. Maybe he's not as good defensively as you'd want because he's not quite as quick as the others, so he doesn't get back into position as well. But let's just say, hypothetically, Theo Hernandez, Danilo, and Hjulman in year 1. And then in year 2, you go and you get João Pedro from Brighton, who can be that conduit 9. I think that's what he would have wanted to do. A hybrid between Klopp's Liverpool at their very best and his original Real Madrid team. I think that's what he would have looked for. And when we look at what he's done with the midfield at Real, I know he had Cruz, and that's where McAllister comes in. He's not a Cruz type, but he does give you a modicum of control in there. But he has Tchouaméni, he has Valverde, he has Camavinga. He always wants athletes in there as well. He wants transition killers in there. So I think he would have done something along those lines. And I think that would have been a hell of a team. The reason Szoboszlai works there is because that left back fills the space wide, overlaps him, and allows Szoboszlai to play infield a bit more, where his passing, his crossing, and his shooting all become real weapons. He does have the ability to run in behind. He's not Bale quick, but he is rapid. Like, he is lightning quick himself. I don't think Núñez works. I don't think Diaz works. I think they would have to go. I think he could make use of Gakpo in that 9 position as well. Gakpo did well as a 9 when he first joined. I think if Núñez was to get minutes, it would be on the left or on the right rather than through the middle. I don't think Diaz works. I don't think he'd want that individualistic type of winger in that team. I know they have Vinny Jr. now, but Vinny is such a special talent. And what Carlo's great at is when there is a special talent, he will allow them to play outside of what he's trying to accomplish because it's additive and it doesn't take away from anything else. So there's question 1 for us. Moving on, this one is from AMK2889. Since 2023, Spain has won a Women's World Cup, Men's Euros, both Men's and Women's Champions League clubs. Our current Champions League winning clubs are from Spain. The Olympic women's team took 4th and looked to have underperformed, and the men's team won the Olympics. Also, Aitana Bonmati is the current holder of the Ballon d'Or. Is this current domination from Spanish football more impressive than what the domination from French football with the current youth and senior pool have? Yeah, it is. It's a lot more impressive, frankly. I mean, I just think France underachieved tournament after tournament after tournament. And when I look at the Spain men's team and what they've just accomplished, and I project ahead to the next World Cup, I'm not sure they shouldn't be considered favourites to win the next World Cup. And not only that, but, pretty strong favourites as well. Now, they don't have an elite level goalkeeper. That's somewhat of an issue for me. But they do have decent goalkeepers. David Raya is a decent goalkeeper. Alex Romero is a decent goalkeeper. Unai Simon, I think, is a good goalkeeper. But they don't have that elite keeper. And I don't know that there's one on the horizon for them. Like, Kepa is the other senior keeper who's been in and around the squad in recent years, but nobody's mistaking him for an elite level goalkeeper. If we look at their squad in the Olympics, Arnaud Tenas, and he's not elite. Yon Garcia, nobody would view him as an elite prospect. Talented, for sure, but not elite. And Iturbe, I don't know enough about. Maybe, but I don't know. When we look at the under-21 squad, again, there just isn't an elite level goalkeeping option there. But it's a solid enough group. Defensively, though, that was seen as the weak point in this tournament. But let's not forget, Pedro Porro is primed and ready to take over as the right back. They also have Arnaud Martinez, who is outstanding. They also have Ivan Fresneda, who's a big prospect. So there's 3 really good right backs on the horizon for Spain. At left back, they had Marc Cucurella, who's okay. There's obviously weaknesses there. They've also got Alex Grimaldo, who's really good going forward, not great defensively. They do have Alejandro Balde, who wasn't in the squad, and he is exceptional. They also have Miguel Gutierrez, who is fantastic. So there's two excellent young left-backs who are both going to be ready to go by the next World Cup. The centre-back group, Lenormand is good, Laporte is good. I would say Daniel Vivian is okay. I wouldn't be a huge fan. Nacho is still good, but obviously I don't think he'll be playing by the next World Cup now that he's moved on to play in Saudi. But again, look at what's coming through. You've got Dean Huijsen, who's a massive talent. Christian Mosquera, who's a massive talent. And you've got Pau Cubarsí, who might be the biggest talent of them all. You've also got Rafa Marin, who's just gone to Napoli, who's another big talent. So they're going to get better across the board in defence. We look at that midfield group, and you've got Moreno. He'll be 30 by then. That's fine. Fabian Ruiz will be 30 by then. Again, that's fine. He'll still be there. Alex Baena will be 23 by the time the World Cup comes around. Rodri will turn 30 that summer. Zubimendi will be 27. Pedri will only be 24. Fermin Lopez will be 23. You've also got Gavi to come back into the mix. You've got Torrientes developing nicely at Real Sociedad. You've got Pablo Torre, you've got Pablo Barrios, you've got Javi Guerra at Valencia. You've got Unai Gomez at Athletic Bilbao. You've got his Athletic Bilbao teammate, who I was a little bit surprised didn't make the squad for the Euros, in Sunset. Like, Spain are going nowhere. That midfield is going to continue to go from strength to strength over the next 2 years. Then in attack, you've got Lamine Yamal, who is ridiculous, and you've got Nico Williams, who is an outrage, an absolute outrage. Behind them, you've got Dani Olmo, you've got Mikel Oyarzabal, you've got Ferran Torres. These are quality players. You've got what's the winger at Villarreal? Yeremy Pino, another talented one. Now, the question is the number 9 position. That is the big doubt with Spain moving forward. That's the big doubt. Because nobody looks at Alvaro Morata and thinks, you're a great striker. And he'll be 34 shortly after the next World Cup. He shouldn't be in the squad come then. I also missed out Alex Garcia, Marcos Llorente, and Rodrigo Riquelme as other midfield type of options that could come in. I missed out Pau Torres as a centre-back option. Like, the list goes on. The question is, and Brian Saragossa is another wing option. Ansu Fati, if he gets back, is another wing option. The question is going to be, what do they do as a number 9? And the hope for them has to be that someone develops into that role. And the most obvious one is Amora Dion. Currently at Atletico Madrid, looked like he was going to go to Chelsea. Now it appears he's going to go somewhere else. But he's only had one season of senior football at La Liga level. And he only scored 8 goals in 34 games. So he's still a long way away from being ready. But Spain have proven before that they can win without an elite number 9. Now, the second part of that question was, is this better than what we saw from 08 to 2012? And I would say no, in part because at that time we did have that incredible Barcelona team as well. But this is across the board. This is men's and women's. And the answer to that is yes, because this is the strongest era of their women's national team. This men's national team is not as good as that 08, 10 or 12 team, but it is really, really good. And it does open up now for them to potentially win the World Cup and then go and defend the Euros champion title 2 years after that. We're going to see Real Madrid continue to dominate. I think we'll see more Spanish clubs winning the Europa League and winning the Europa Conference League. And I think that we will see continued growth in the women's side of the game because there's a lot of excitement around the women's side of the game in Spain. So I think it has the potential to outstrip that. This Real team could be that Barca team in terms of dominance, maybe even more so. Maybe win more European Cups. That Barca team only won 2. Now, winning 2 is still a hell of an achievement, but this Real team have won 2 in the last 3 years. And that was pre-Kylian Mbappe. What do they do now with him? Especially if City fall off after Pep leaves in a year. I don't see anybody on the horizon that's really going to replace City as that standout threat. I think there'll be a bunch of really good teams. I think Liverpool will get there. I think Arsenal will get there. I think we see Inter should be a threat. I think I could see Juventus getting back to being good. I think Bayern eventually will get things right. PSG will be a threat because they can throw so much money at it. But I don't see anybody that stands up. Like when Pep's Barca won back-to-back, won 2 Champions Leagues in 3 years, they went up against a great Inter Milan team under Jose. They also went up against an outstanding United team. Now, the second time around, not as much. They weren't as good. That team had gotten a little bit old. But the 2009 United team were reigning European Cup winners, 3-time Premier League on the bounce champions, and had Cristiano exploding, had Tevez, Berbatov, Rooney getting the tail end, the post-prime, let's say, of Scholes. Carrick was in his prime. Rio and Vidic were in their prime. Van der Sar was great. Ever was in his prime. That United team were really, really good. There's nobody around now that strikes me as being as good as that United team in the next couple of years. So I could see Real dominating. I could see Spain winning the next, maybe not the next 2 in a row, but certainly one of the next two of the next 5, you know, with these young players. Like, Lamine Yamal is just 17. And then you look through the academy at Barcelona and some of these players that are coming along and are just tipped for the absolute stars, and some of the players that are coming through at Real now, whether they get into the first team or not remains seen. But yeah, I think it's going to be a dominant era for Spain potentially. Matt JT, if you could make Mamardashvili signing loans for defenders, midfielders, and attackers, who would you sign and where would you send them on loan before coming to Liverpool? So, to be fair, the 2 attackers I would have wanted have both moved this summer, Yankuba Minta and Matthias Sula. So I can't pick either of them, but I suppose the player I can pick, who different type of player. I think he's more naturally an attacking midfielder rather than a wide player, but I do think he'd thrive in that right-sided role if he was used as a playmaker there, is Franco Mastantuono at River Plate. Now, he's only 17, so he can't come to England until he's 18. So he would be like a 2-year project. You buy him now, leave him there for a year, have him come to Europe next summer, loan him to another team maybe, and then you bring him in. Where I would loan him, obviously River Plate year 1. Year 2, I think Portugal's a great entry point into Europe. So I would probably look at Benfica because big club, big crowd, big expectations, pressure, but a decent culture of player development. So I'd probably look there maybe. He'd be one for certain. I think he's a special talent. Who would? Let's start with, again, the defender I would have picked would probably have been Dean Huijsen. As a centre-back, I do think he's exceptionally good. Exceptionally high potential, I should say. Like, I look at the size, the ball playing, it's all there for him. But since he's gone now, let's have a gander and see. Right, we want defenders, we want age group. I suppose we'll go under 21. Probably makes the most sense. I want to try and keep this as realistic as possible, so not Pau Cubarsí, because there's no way that you're getting him out of Barcelona. I mean, I would probably consider Scalvini, even with the ACL tear, leave him there for a year. But if you're talking about doing it like this, where you buy them now, you loan them for a year, and then you bring them in 12 months. Joel Hato would be the defender that I'd look at. He'd be the defender. And I would loan him to Brighton to play left side of Herzlier's back three. I think it would prepare him well to play left back in Arna's 4. So I'll go with Hato as the defender. Midfielder. I mean, Warren Zaire-Emery's just not realistic, but it would be him because I just think he's that special. Carlos Baliba jumps out to me as an option. Javi Guerra jumps out to me as an option. Javi Guerra might be the one. Archie Gray would have been the one. Let's be clear. Archie Gray would have been the one. But he's gone. Javi Guerra would make sense. Now, I would want to loan him to a Premier League team again, because again, I just think getting him used to the pace and physicality of the league is very, very important. So, where would we put him? You don't want him going to a bad team. You want him going somewhere where they're going to have a decent amount of the ball, where he's going to play under a progressive type of manager. So, can't be a top 8 club, because they're obviously not going to just take him on loan to develop him for you. So you were ruling out Arsenal, Villa, Chelsea, City, United, Spurs and Newcastle. I'm going to rule out Forest on the basis of Nuno. I would probably say Ipswich, because of the manager that they have. Because I think Kieran McKenna would do a really good job with his development, because he made his bones as a development coach. But Ipswich, there's a chance they get overrun in a lot of games and don't have much more than 35% of the ball. If Brentford played like they did in the Championship, I'd be interested in Thomas Frank as that development coach, but the way they've played in the Premier League is a little bit more reductive. Can't send another one to Brighton. I mean, Bournemouth would make a ton of sense because of Iraola and how he likes to play. I'll say Ipswich. I'll say Ipswich under Kieran McKenna. Yeah, I'd go Javi Guerra. I think he is the one that, like, Baliba is, I think, a huge talent. The only other one in midfield would be Lucas Gornadort. And actually, you might talk me into him over Guerra. So either of them, and send them to Bournemouth to work under, Andoni Iraola, because they're just an outstanding manager. Like a genuinely outstanding manager. So now we need a forward player. And I mean, I'd love Enciso, but we're trying to avoid Premier League players. Would take him out. Bradley Barcola is not realistic. I wouldn't want Sesko. Ardagula is not realistic. I don't want Bakayoko. I don't think Matthias Tell would be absolute dynamite. I wouldn't be against that at all. Desiree Doué would have been the one, but he's just agreed to go to PSG. The foolish lad. I like Keelan Yildiz. I like what I've seen of Ernest Nuama. Maybe him. Maybe Ernest Nuama. The Ghanaian winger at Lyon. Before Lyon get their clutches into him too much. Didn't have a great year last year, but I think he'll kick on this year. If I can just take Mastantuono, I'll take him. Do you know what? I'll take him. Mastantuono, and we'll just say he's old enough to come to Europe, and we'll put him at Benfica for a year, and he'll be my one. Right, that is that, and I think I got one in. Here we go. Right, Alex, what would you make of Bjorn Meyer as a signing for Liverpool this summer? I quite like Bjorn Meyer. He's an interesting player because he's massive and obviously plays as a fullback. Now, he can also play as a centre-back, so you do get good versatility with him. He is good on the ball. I think we're more likely to see him develop as a centre-back over the next couple of years. When you look at the squad there at Club Brugge, I think the more likely left-back moving forward will be Maxim de Kuyper. So I think Meyer, despite having made his bones more as a left-back, I think he ends up playing more centrally. Like, I think he's 6'2", 6'3". I think he's got a knee injury at the moment. He's out for a while. I think he's probably a year away from being, ready to really contribute for a club like Liverpool. I'm not sure how long he's going to be out for. I do notice as well, he's had a couple of injury issues. He had abdominal injury last year that made him miss the first couple months of the season. I wouldn't be against it. Yeah, I wouldn't be against it. Ideally, I'd like to bringing in two for that position because I'd like to move Robertson and Tsimikas out the door. The issue is I'd want my nailed-on starter to be that profile, that bigger, stronger, more centre-back type of build. And then the younger, more prospecty one to be more of an attacking option as opposed to bringing in the younger option as the more centre-backy type of one and then have the attacking one as the starter. So I suppose I would take him. I wouldn't be upset, but he wouldn't be someone that I would look at this summer. Could you make an 11 of Premier League players that could be eligible for a Comeback Player of the Season award if the upcoming season goes well? I absolutely can. Right, let's get into this. So, goalkeeper. Right. Last year, obviously, was a disastrous year for Aaron Ramsdale, who had a complete fall off, lost his place when he did get in the team, was awful. If he gets a Premier League move, I would say it could very well be him. In defence, centre-back, Lewis Dunk, shocking last year. Absolutely shocking. But maybe in a 3, as long as he's in the middle of it, maybe in a 3 with less ground to cover, it suits him better. So I'll go Lewis Dunk as one of my centre-backs. My other centre-back, I'm going to go Nathan Collins. Just had a really up and down year for Brentford. And I think he's capable of a lot more, so I'll go with him. Fullbacks. Purvis Estupiñán is an obvious pick at left back. Injury plague last year. I think he bounces back. Likewise, now, I'm less certain this fella bounces back from the injuries, but he was injury plague last year, missed most of the season, and is a high-level player, Reece James. So I'll go with him as my other fullback. Midfield. Doucouré is an obvious one, missed 90% of the season last year with an injury, so I'll go Doucouré from Palace, that is. Check Doucouré. Calvin Phillips, I'll go as another midfielder. And I might just leave it at 2 midfielders. Yeah, I'll leave it at 2 midfielders. Doucouré and Calvin Phillips. And then in attack, well, right wing, left wing strikers. Julio Enciso will be one of the forwards. Missed most of last season with a knee injury. Marcus Rashford on the left wing. Awful last year. I expect him to bounce back. I think Ivan Toney potentially is the 9. Motivated to earn a move. Chip on his shoulder. I'll go Ivan Toney and Enciso through the middle. Off the left. Do you know what? I'll go Martinelli and Rashford as the wingers. Martinelli can shift across and play on the right. Yeah, so Ramsdale, he might not get a move though. Do you know what? I'll go Dean Henderson as the goalkeeper because he's definitely going to play. So I'll go Dean Henderson as the goalkeeper. Reece James and Purvis Estupiñán as the fullbacks. Lewis Dunk and Nathan Collins in the middle. Martinelli right. Doucouré and Phillips in the middle. Rashford left. Toney and Enciso as my strikers. With a doff of the cap to Sandro Tonali, who I think should have a decent enough season as well. Right, that is all the questions. I'll be back after the break. Right, welcome back. So, John Texter, part owner of Crystal Palace, has been granted a period of exclusivity to assess a possible takeover of Everton Football Club. Now, he does own 45% of Palace and would need to sell that percentage. Perhaps Blitzer and Harris buy him out and take more control there at Palace. They obviously Steve Parish would retain his share as well. Texter owns a bunch of clubs, including Lyon. He has been very, very busy in his hoovering up of football clubs. He owns Botafogo in Brazil. He owns Molenbeek in Belgium, and obviously Lyon and the Lyon women's team, which are actually separate entities, separated a few years back for tax purposes. So he hasn't proven to be a great owner, but he hasn't proven to be a bad owner either. So we'll see how it goes. Everton needs saving, but they are a financial disaster. And I do think there will have to be some hard discussions had over the financial future of that club. They owe a fortune to 777 Partners, to MSD Investments, and to somebody else as well. And they've got a big bill to foot for the stadium, and they're facing a potential points deduction for violation 2 years ago, and they're facing potential administration. So, not great. But look, I just want to see Everton saved. Yves Bissouma has been suspended for one match by Tottenham. He will miss their opening league match against Leicester City after footage appeared to show the midfielder inhaling laughing gas. He has apologised for severe lack of judgment, and Ange Postecoglou said, "We've suspended him for Monday's game. Beyond that, there needs to be some trust building that happens between Biss and me, as well as Biss and the group. That's what he needs to work hard at from now on to win that back. He's going to have to earn that. The door is open for him, and hopefully we can help him realise the decisions he makes impact more than just him. Hopefully it allows him to make better decisions moving forward." And, as always, level-headed. So, hopefully he gets his act together, because I do like Yves Bissouma. Calvin Phillips. Did I not say Calvin Phillips would make a really good signing for Ipswich Town? I think I did. And Calvin Phillips is set to join Ipswich Town on a season-long loan. So it looks like they might get Jens Cahoust and Calvin Phillips. Those two midfielders would massively improve Ipswich and their chances of staying in the division. Burnley have signed João Mendes, who is Ronaldinho's son. Now, they've said he's going to be a development prospect and not a first-team regular. I don't know how good the kid is. I have no idea. He was in Cruzeiro's academy in Brazil, signed for Barcelona's under-19s last season, and it was only a one-year contract. At the time, it did seem like it was a favour to his dad, who obviously was legendary there, rather than something that Barcelona actually were putting real time and thought into. But we'll see. Hopefully the kid goes on to do well. The FA has fined Nuno Espirito Santo 40,000 and giving him a suspended one-match touchline ban, and Nico Williams, who's been fined 24,000 for misconduct after last season's defeat by Everton. Okay, that ban for Nuno will hang over him for 2 years, so he'll need to keep his act together, because any future bans would be tacked to that. Bournemouth have agreed a club record £40.2 million deal to sign Evan Nielsen from Porto. 31.7 million with 8.5 million in add-ons. I think this is a really good signing. I genuinely do. It's a club record. It's a big move. It's a brave move, but they got a ton of money in for Solanke, and I think he is a striker whose all-round game replaces Solanke well. I think he could do really well there, especially under this manager. With the wingers that they have, I think they'll carry a decent goal threat. Much better signing for me than Eddie Nketiah, who will maybe get you as many or more goals, because he might be a little bit better of a finisher, but doesn't offer you anything outside the penalty area. On to the gossip. Napoli have opened talks with Manchester United over the potential signing of Scott McTominay. So Napoli are potentially going to go into next season with Scott McTominay and Billy Gilmore as their midfield, the Scotland midfield, which is mediocre at best. This is a club that won Serie A 15 months ago. Is it any wonder Osman and Kvaratskhelia want to leave? Manchester United are expecting formal bids for Christian Eriksen. They haven't come yet. I wouldn't hold my breath. Napoli are close to signing Billy Gilmore. Chelsea are back in talks to sign Victor Osimhen. Antonio Conte wants Belgian forward Romelu Lukaku and Italian midfielder Cesare Caicedo as part of the Osimhen transfer. Caicedo is good. PSG are cooling their interest in Jadon Sancho and also considering pulling out of the race to sign Osimhen. I think if PSG really wanted Osimhen, that deal will probably be done. West Ham have set their sights on Tammy Abraham, highly unlikely considering they've just signed Fulkrug. Arsenal are prepared to be patient in their pursuit of Mikel Moreno. Yeah, they need to sell a player. Ipswich are poised to sign Jens Kahoust. Tottenham are poised to sell more players before the transfer window as Ange Postecoglou whittles down the squad to those who fit his style of play. Goodbye, Oliver Skip. Saudi Pro League side Al Qadsiya have offered Ivan Toney an annual salary of 15.4 million, which I think is 300 grand a week if my maths is right, and a 3-year contract to entice him to leave Brentford. Wolves are considering Yohan Wissa of Brentford as a replacement for Pedro Neto. Aston Villa are working on a deal to sign 19-year-old Colombian defender Eymar Mosquera. Okay, interesting. They've got Yon Duran there, so they will have a Colombian in-house. That's if he stays, who could maybe help him settle. Bologna are interested in a loan move for Trevoh Chalobah. I think Chelsea will insist on a permanent deal. And Maurizio Pochettino is close to becoming the next manager of the US men's national team, and I believe that has been confirmed. I think I saw that. Was it Ornstein? Let's see. David Ornstein. Yeah, Maurizio Pochettino agrees to become the US head coach. Argentine, the top target to succeed Greg Berhalter. I actually think that's a great appointment. I really do. I think it's a great appointment. Also, last night, Brighton activated the 40 million release clause of Leeds United forward Jorginho Rutter. I think it's a little bit of an overpay, but I do really like him as a player, so I'm not against it. But now they're overly loaded with forwards. I think there's a sale coming. Ornstein also had the John Textor story. What does our friend the spoofer have in store for us? Let's just check the last few hours. Man City to sign one more talent as they close in on Divan Mubama deal. Okay. Eric Ten Hag says Harry Maguire, Matthias de Ligt and Azar Mizraoui will all be available for the Fulham game. Yusuf Fofana is travelling to Milan to join AC Milan after terms were finally agreed between them and Monaco. Marco Reus has finally signed his contract for LA Galaxy. Crystal Palace have concrete interest in Robin Gosens. Interesting. I did say they could use an upgrade at a depth piece at wing back. Now I would have said more right back, but Gosens is good. Gosens is good, and he would fit the style really well. Paulo Dybala potentially going to Al Qadsiya. Jorginho Rutter looks like he's decided he's going to go to Brighton. Leeds tried to convince him to stay, but unsuccessfully. And it looks like they're going to go for Ferdi Kadioglu as well. We'll have to talk about Brighton one of the days next week. Yusuf Fofana. Hoffenheim are trying to hijack Adam Plozik's move to Leicester. Leicester have a loan with an obligation in place. That is pretty much it. Yeah, that is it. Right, folks, that's me for today. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye-bye.
This podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.